Hello everyone, welcome back to another session of Dark Souls PvP and another weapon showcase. This time I'm using the Lifehunt Scythe because it was requested, and I've got to say, this is a really dangerous weapon. I'm sure we all know that by now from fighting against people who use it, but man, using this thing is really just very easy. Other than that, let's get started with the weapon itself. The Lifehunt Scythe, I almost called it the Great Scythe for a second. The Lifehunt Scythe has a weight of 6 units. It has a B scaling in dexterity at +5, and it actually has an E scaling, but who cares, that's nothing. The bleed buildup is 50 per hit. It's 40 per hit against you though. So that's one thing you really need to keep in mind. You want to have a good amount of bleed resistance when you're using this weapon. The two main things people use are the Blood Bite Ring and the Blood Shield. Currently I have the Blood Bite Ring on. As you can see, I have a massive bleed bar meter thingy. So you really can see it takes quite a while for that to build up. And if you're able to do it and you are unfortunate enough to run into a hacker, you will actually be able to kill them before you bleed yourself out if you're wearing the Blood Bite Ring. You wouldn't have to worry about blood red moss clumps, which is another thing people often use when they're using the Lifehunt Scythe. So that's that. Now the pros and the cons of the weapon, I would have to say the biggest pro is the fact that it does so much with bleed damage and builds up so fast. I mean, 50 bleed buildup per hit and bleeding out for 50% of your opponent's total health, that's really dangerous, and it is a really great benefit to the weapon. It has really good solid damage overall. For me, with my 35 dexterity, I can't believe I just said that wrong. With my 35 dexterity, this weapon is doing, I think it's 475 damage, or around that. The Great Scythe does a little bit more, but I do believe the Great Scythe has an A scaling in dexterity instead, so that does explain that. But again, this has the better bleed buildup and bleed out damage, so trade-offs. Now, other good pros about the weapon, you've got the typical Scythe pros, the typical Great Scythe pros. The running attacks and the R2s, both one-handed and two-handed, are very, very wide swings. They dead angle really easily, and it's really kind of hard not to accidentally dead angle someone when you're using this weapon. It just sort of happens, and you really can't always control it. Now, the cons, on the other hand, I would have to say that the biggest con of the weapon would not be the fact that you actually have a bleed buildup on yourself. It would be the fact that the R1 attacks miss so often. They have almost no tracking ability, and they just kind of suck. I mean, it's okay if someone is running backwards or walking backwards or occasionally rolling backwards if you time it right, but if they move to the side any little bit, you're not going to hit them. So that's why I think that's the main con of the weapon. Other cons, I would have to say, of course, you've got the bleed buildup, for yourself that is, and you can bleed yourself out. It's kind of entertaining, and usually the first time you do it, you get a good laugh out of it, and especially if that happens when you're dueling a friend or someone that you know, you will definitely have them not letting you, well, forget anytime soon. And I guess we should just leave it at that, shouldn't we? Let's see. Other things you can do with this weapon, you can really take advantage of its R2 attacks, like I was saying before. You can use it like I just did right there to bait someone in to go for an attack and then suddenly swing around, unlock and just swing around like I did, because they won't be expecting it, and it just works really well. Because if you turn around when you're doing it, you have essentially a 360-degree swing around you. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to, avoid that if they're anywhere within range. Plus, the dead angling potential is really just incredible. And I know I've said that already, but I just feel like I need to go over that again. That almost might be able to be considered the main pro of the weapon, but I had run into a hacker the day before recording this commentary, and that video is actually up, so I'm definitely saying that the bleed buildup is more significant than the dead angling ability. So right here I've switched off from the Blood Bite ring to the blood shield. I know everyone's going to ask what happened right there. He move swapped on me. That's what happened right there. That's what it looks like from the end of someone who it's being done against when there's any tiny little bit of lag. So just saying, I don't want it to turn into a huge discussion on move swapping, but that's what it looks like from the other end of things, okay? So that's why some people have issues with it. It doesn't always appear nice and clean like it does on the end of the person doing it. Moving on though, I don't want to see that in the comments. Any comments on that I most likely will be deleting, so please, just keep your thoughts to yourselves and moving on. Now, the Lifehunt Scythe is a really reliable weapon, but again, you really have to pay attention to your bleed buildup, especially if you're not wearing a blood shield or a blood bite ring. Now, the reason for that is because when you have the blood bite ring on, I believe it gives you 400% more bleed resistance. That's a lot of bleed resistance. I mean, you saw how big that bar was, but man, that's a lot of bleed resistance. That's just kind of overkill somewhat. It's really necessary though if you do run into a hacker like I did that other day. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And if you do make a build that is able to use an extra ring slot, I would highly suggest you would use the blood bite ring if you're going to be using this weapon. Or even in general if you're going to be fighting against someone who uses this weapon, because it'll really help out a lot. They won't be able to bleed you, and it's significantly less terrifying to fight against if you know they have almost no chance of bleeding you out. So really this weapon has a huge fear factor to it. People are really afraid of the Scythe weapons, and they're hard to fight against. I'll admit that. They are hard to fight against in the right hands. In the wrong hands, though, they are extremely easy to counter because people will only do certain things over and over. People don't think to do the R2 attacks or to think to do 2 R2 attacks in a row. They'll only do running attacks. And because of that, all you really have to do is get a nice heavy weapon, time your attack well, and then just flatten them, just pancake them, boom. I would suggest a Great Axe for that, by the way. Just saying. Now, right here, I was actually expecting him to be flipping around with a Hornet Ring also, and just go straight in for my back trying to one-shot me. I was kind of pleasantly surprised I was wrong. So this is the second to last fight. As you saw, I just hit a little over 700 damage on him with that attack I got. That's because he was in an instability frame from a roll. This weapon is very good at picking up people on those when they're rolling sideways. So that was a bit of luck on my part when he was rolling then, but I'm not going to complain. Alright then, so that pretty much sums up the weapon. Just to quickly recap, it's got that great bleed buildup, it's got the great dead angling ability, it has horrible R1 attacks though, and the bleed buildup also builds up on you, so keep that in mind. Oh, and I'm using no thing to boost my bleed resistance here, so yeah, it was close. Anyway, that's the end. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching.